I am ready to start filling out the surfaces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all these planes, and I'm going to hide the sketches, the references too, just to give you a better view of what's going on, and because I don't need them so much. So you can see these don't need to be here because they just defined planes. They don't need to be visible. So I've got this kind of skeleton of the turret, and I'm doing the turret in two sections. You can see that this bottom part isn't modeled yet. So I'm going to do this top 4/5 to start with. So we're about at the point where we can do that. So these are all just references. These are just telling us where important things are. So in the next section, I will start filling it out. All right, so for this next section, starting where we left off, I'm going to start building out the surfaces, because that's what this video is about, is surfacing. And to do that, you've got to kind of get corresponding pieces, and you're going to break it up. So I'm going to break it up into this surface, and then a surface here, and a surface here, and the roof surface, and then I'll start doing the bottom. And what that's going to let me do is create different surfaces that represent different sections of the turret, and then I can stitch them together to really lock down the shape of the turret. So to start out, this is one curve, and that is already what we want, but you see how this sketch here has this front section that doesn't correspond to anything on this on the roof section here. So I'm actually going to take this plane that I already had, and I'm going to create a new sketch, and I'm going to select just the components that kind of correspond to this top piece. I'm going to convert it. So I know that this looks redundant, and in some sense it is, but you've got to, like, if you're doing the feature I'm going to use, if I had this extra piece, it's going to try mapping this length to this length, and you're going to have some weird artifacts showing up where it's taking this point to this point, and then this point is going to be taken to some intermediate point, and it's going to have creases. So what I want is I want to take sections that correspond. So in this case, this lower section, so I'll hide this for now, this lower section, and this upper section, which is sketch 11. And you can see how they correspond to the same kind of rough shape. Each line, like this line corresponds to this line, this curve to this curve, etc. So that's all what we want. So now to get into surfaces, you're going to go to your surfaces tab, which might not be here. So if you right click on your tabs, it's toolbars you want, and you can select your surfaces toolbar, and that will create the option here. I have it as one of my defaults, but that's not necessarily going to be true for you. So that's how you create this bar, and these are the tools we're going to be using. I'm going to get rid of it on my screen because I already have it as a toolbar here, but that's how you get that to show up. So first what we're going to do is we're going to do a boundary surface. Boundaries are very much like lofts, but they have a bit more control, and I just prefer them. But for this case, they will act like a loft anyway, but I find that I prefer them, so I'm going to use them. In fact, actually, looking at the schematic, looking at the plans, I'm going to make the front view. We can see that it actually arcs up. It's like, so here it goes down, but here it's got like this curvature. So actually we will need a boundary because the loft is just going to go directly between the two. The boundary has a tool where we can actually set the curvature to be normal at this, like, so perpendicular to this plane, the plane that this sketch is on at this initial point. So to emphasize that, what I'll do is I'll actually show you what a loft does to start. So if I go to lofted surface and I select this sketch and then this sketch, you can see it just draws a straight line between the two. And that isn't quite what we want. But if I go to boundary surface and do the same thing, it's going to look the same to start with. It looks the same, but I can click on, so if you click on this top here, you can set the type of boundary curvature. So I'm going to hit none there because I want it to just be flat there. But in this bottom, we saw on the front view, which I will pull up because it's useful, that it has a curvature. So you can see this doesn't align yet, but if I click on this sketch 15, this bottom sketch, and I hit normal to profile, you can also do direction. So you set a vector and you can have it kind of bulge out in that vector direction. I'm going to set normal, so it's just going to do perpendicular to the plane that I drew on. And you can see it creates this roundedness. And then I can kind of tweak how rounded it gets. And I'm going to kind of approximate how that should look. And in fact, it looks like it's flatter up here than down here. So what I might want to do is actually use a direction vector at the top here. I'm going to do something that I should have done in the previous section, but I didn't. But to get that curvature, what I wanted to do is I actually want to say like it's flat up until this point, and then it's got that kind of rounded shape. So, sorry, this is a little confusing visually, but this line is meant, so I'm going to edit it. Right now it's fixed, so I don't want that. But I want this line to kind of correspond to where it's flat. And that way I kind of know like it's roughly flat and then it has that curvature. So I'll take that. It's that line, and I'm going to create a plane on that line. So I'm breaking this up into another section that I didn't specify earlier, but looking at it now will be important. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that like it kind of bulges out. So this piece here should have like a bit of a bulge to it, meaning it's rounded here and then it goes flat. I'm going to select this point and this point, and I'm going to create a plane between the two. And then I'm going to do the right view. And what this is going to let me do is this is going to let me kind of define like how does the curvature look. So we know that up here at the point where it meets, it's kind of flat, and then it rounds off. So I'm going to do a tangent arc, and this is going to correspond to this, like intersect, pierce there, and this is going to pierce up here. And I go to my front view, and I'm going to kind of play with it a little just by manipulating this. And a trick is this needs to be tangent or perpendicular to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a vertical line that we know is perpendicular, and like so. Well, actually, that because the sketch is weird, but it needs to be a vertical line. And then this vertical line is going to be tangent to this arc. And what that's going to do is it's going to make sure the arc is perpendicular at this point to this top sketch. I know this is a little like heavy geometrically, but that's kind of surfaces. Is you got to be very aware of geometry. And so here I have this flat section, and then I have this bulge, and you can see it doesn't quite go out as far as it should. That was because the top view is weird. So it's very, like, as I said, eyeballing, trying to get the rough shape correct when there's some weird information being provided. I'm going to hide this now, and I'm going to hide this. So this is going to define sort of a guide for how the surface curvature behaves. So we saw that originally it created a straight line, but we didn't want that. So now if I go to the boundary surface and I click this top and this bottom, it's going to create a straight line, and that doesn't mesh with this curve. But if I do, this is the guide section. So if I click on a guide and then I click on this guide curve, you can see it edits the topology or the structure of the turrets to follow this curve as well. So it's constrained by everything. And this front looks a little weird. That's fine. This will be corrected later. If I commit, you can see it has that nice shape where it's flat on the back. It's got some weird artifacts back here. So to fix that, what I'd want to do is I'd want to go to my midplane, and I just want, because this should be flush. So before I go to, I'm going to go back before my boundary surface. I'm going to go to my midplane, and I'm just going to say this line is preserved. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace this line, because that line should be one of the guides. And then if I go back here and I edit my boundary surface, edit feature, now for a guide I select that. Okay, so the issue here is it doesn't actually go to this bound, it goes down to here, and it needs to go, it can't exceed, because it's trying to like be like, okay, I go from here but also from here, and that's contradictory, so it's not going to like that. So I have to edit the sketch, and I have to make sure that it doesn't go past this plane or this line. So I'll draw on this line, and I'll just use that as like kind of a, this is almost like a saw, and then I can cut this lower section off and just discard it. And now this line only goes where I want it to be. In fact, it goes not quite where I want it to be. This sketch here should in fact meet with this. which is this plane. So this line is on this plane. So I should do collinear, and that looks good. And now I can edit my boundary surface. And right now it's trying to select this projected side view, not the new sketch. So I have to go into the feature tree and select the new sketch. That wasn't construction geometry, evidently. Or it was, but this doesn't extend all the way. So this needs to go down to here. And that should work. As long as it pierces here, which it does not, so that won't work. So you can see there's a lot of kind of troubleshooting and trial and error and just getting it to line up properly. But there we go. I believe that should work, as I've said several times and been wrong, but now it works. So that just ensures that it goes to this bound, which is what we want. So that'll give us a big section of the turret's geometry, and now we're going to do the lower section here, which will be a little easier, I believe. Well, I know. So what we're going to do there is we need the bottom of the turret. And we know the bottom of the turret is going to kind of follow this, but be inset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a plane, I'm going to use this bottom part of the side view, and I'm going to create this reference. And this reference is going to go, it's going to follow the rough shape. I know that I'm just kind of drawing kind of a random thing right now, but that's just to get the rough shape, and then I have to, this point is going to pierce this here. So I'm going to set the geometric constraints with respect to each other. So this is parallel, and this is parallel. And then from the side view, or from the front view, which I have pulled up on my second monitor, which isn't too useful for you, but I can see that this curvature is roughly the same as this curvature, which means that this distance here is going to be the same as this distance and this distance. So if I go back to this edit, I can say that if I draw a perpendicular line like so, it should be perpendicular, and do another one here, and then do one like this. These lines should all have the same length. So this is just geometric thinking and constraining things geometrically. So I select these three, and I'm going to say they're equal. And that's going to give me this kind of very constrained shape. Here, this isn't perpendicular, and it should be, so I'll constrain that. And now I can go to my fillets. It's going to throw an error because you're kind of taking these fixed constrained geometries and playing with them, and it doesn't like that very much. But too bad, I'm going to do it anyway. So some of these errors pop up, and they don't really mean anything. Well, they mean something, but they don't hurt you. And this line I'm going to extend so that it kind of goes out to roughly here, so I can build off of it, like so. And now I've got this bottom sketch, which is good. And I want to do the same kind of thing I did on the with this back constraint here, just so it closes properly. So I'm going to go to my midplane, and I'm going to, in this case, convert this, and then I'm going to draw my clips, like my kind of cuts, which are these. And I'm going to cut everything that's outside of that off with the trim, like so. And that just gives me this guide. And what I can do is I can take this lower plane, which is now kind of inserted into this boundary, but I'm going to open this boundary, click on it here, and then I'm going to do a boundary surface, and click on this lower one, and that is not the correct one. This is. And you can see it draws the straight line again, which isn't what we want, but what we can do is we can draw this guide curve, which is good. See, it's pretty good. It has the right curvature on the back, but the sides are still a little wonky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this this piece in the middle, because it should have a smooth curvature here, and now there's more options. You can see I have curvature to face and tangency to face. I want this to be tangent to this upper surface, so I'm going to click tangency to face. You can see it's going to have that smooth transition now. And it's going to look a little weird up here. That's not ideal, but it's not a big problem. So I'm going to commit that. And now this looks a little weird. So what you can do to fix that is that tangency. You can select it and you can be like, actually, I want this tangency to have a bit more impact. So you can set the influence of that tangency. I'm going to set it like so it's like very influential. And just kind of play with these two parameters to clean it up and get it to kind of match what you want. And I'm going to apply that. So now I've got this kind of bulk of the turret shape built. And you know what? I'm going to call this video there, and then I'm going to do the rest of the turret in the second part.